Welcome back to the Proverbs series, guys. In today's video specifically, I want to go to chapter 16, verse 24, which reads, "Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body." Woo! Man, that is quite the word right there. That's quite the word right there. And the reason I wanted to look at this verse in particular is because, let me just say this, right? Think about the last time someone said something to you that genuinely stayed with you. Not because it was clever or impressive, but because it was kind in a way that landed exactly when you needed it. You know, maybe it was an encouragement during a hard season, or maybe it was someone speaking gently to you when you expected criticism. Most of us can remember moments like that with surprising clarity, sometimes even years later, because words like that do something to us that an ordinary conversation does not. And now think about the opposite. A harsh comment that replayed in your head for days. A careless remark that cut deeper than the person who said it probably realized. We remember those too, often more vividly than we would like. And Proverbs 16:24 is making a claim about why both of these experiences carry the weight they do. Words are not neutral. They are not just information being transferred from one person to another. Solomon describes gracious words using the imagery of a honeycomb, purest, most concentrated form of sweetness available in the ancient world, for context, and says that this kind of speech produces real effects, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. That is a remarkably physical claim about something we tend to think of as purely abstract. So let's break down the verse, guys. I can't wait to get into this. Gracious words are like a honeycomb. The word gracious here describes speech that is pleasant, kind, and favorable. Words chosen and delivered with genuine goodwill toward the person receiving them. It's not flattery, which we will need to distinguish carefully in a moment, but authentic kindness expressed through language. The Hebrew definition behind it, because for context, Proverbs was written in the Hebrew language. It carries it behind the sense of words that are delightful, the kind of speech that brings pleasure rather than politeness. Even though politeness is good still, but you know what I mean. The image of a honeycomb is the same image we encountered back in Proverbs 5:3, actually, where the forbidden woman's lips were described as dripping honey. But it is worth pausing on that connection because it shows us something important about how scripture uses this particular image. Honeycomb represents the purest, most immediate, most pleasurable form of sweetness, dripping directly from the comb before it has been processed or diluted. Woo! Sorry, I had to let that sneeze. Let's get back to what I was saying though. In Proverbs 5, that sweetness was deceptive, right? Masking bitterness underneath. But here in Proverbs 16:24, the sweetness is genuine, and what is underneath it matches what is on the surface. So the image is identical. The character behind the words is what makes all the difference. And this is actually one of the more important clarifications worth making about this verse. You know, sweet-sounding words are not automatically gracious words, right? The verse is not commending speech that simply sounds pleasant or is technically flattering. No, it is commending words that emerge from genuine grace, kindness rooted in real care for the person receiving them. In Proverbs 26:28, which we'll get to eventually, it warns us directly against the counterfeit version of this, where Solomon says, "A lying tongue hates his victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin." Flattery can sound exactly like graciousness on the surface while actually serving the speaker's interests rather than the listener's good. The honeycomb, though, of gracious words is genuine and real because it comes from a gracious heart, not because it has mastered the technique of just sounding pleasant. And this distinction matters practically because it means the goal here is not learning to say nicer sounding things. It is cultivating the kind of character from which genuinely kind words naturally flow. In Luke 6:45, he makes this mechanism explicit where he says, "The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil, for out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks." And so gracious words are not a performance technique. They are an overflow of a heart that has actually been shaped towards kindness. Now, let's talk about this part of the verse, the sweetness to the soul and health to the body. Because the second half of this verse describes the effect of gracious words, and what is striking is how comprehensive that effect is being described as being. It reaches both the soul, the inner emotional and spiritual life of the person, and the body, the physical condition of the person receiving them. This is not metaphorical flourish here, because Solomon is making a genuine claim about the holistic impact words have on the whole person. This claim is actually borne out by what we understand today about the connection between emotional well-being and physical health. Chronic stress, anxiety, and emotional pain produce measurable physiological effects like elevated cortisol, which is kind of a meme now, but it's true, a weakened immune response, disrupted sleep, cardiovascular strain, and the reverse is equally true. Genuine encouragement, comfort, and kindness produce real physiological benefits, reduce stress hormones, better sleep, a calmer nervous system. So Solomon did not have access to modern medicine, yes, but he did understand something true about human nature that science has since caught up to. That words affect the body, not just the mind. And this connects to a broader theme throughout Proverbs about the power of a tongue. The tongue, a theme worth tracing briefly because it shows how seriously Scripture takes the weight of our words. So in Proverbs 18:21, a couple chapters later in the book, Solomon states it with clarity. He says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits." That's one of my favorite verses of Proverbs, by the way. So we might actually make a whole video on that verse. But it's not poetic exaggeration, because it is a direct claim that our words carry the power to bring life or to bring death into the situations and people they touch. A few verses back in Proverbs 12:8, Solomon makes a related observation that pairs well with this verse in this video, where he says, "There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." And so the contrast between the sword and the healing tongue mirrors exactly the contrast that Proverbs 16:24 here sets up between harsh, careless speech and gracious, life-giving speech. And I think it is also worth pausing on the word health specifically, because the underlying Hebrew language can also carry the sense of healing or medicine in this word specifically, because gracious words are not just pleasant. Remember, they function as medicine to a certain degree, obviously. Like, clinically, probably, but obviously, I don't want to get into that, but it's not like completely. I just wanted to clarify. But the reason I'm saying that is because this gives a genuinely therapeutic dimension to us, to the simple act of speaking kindly to someone, right? A well-timed word of encouragement is not just emotionally nice. Literally, according to Solomon here, it functions as something closer to like treatment, right? An actual intervention in the well-being of the person receiving it. And so let's get practical here. Let's get applicable, because as I always say in my videos, I truly believe that, for us as Christians, turning knowledge into action is one of the most important parts of our walk in life. And so the first thing for us is to treat our words as something with real weight rather than something casual, right? Like, most of us move through dozens of you or even hundreds of conversations a day without much thought about the actual impact of what we're saying. But Proverbs 16:24 asks us to take that impact seriously, because if words genuinely reach the soul and the body of the person receiving them, then the casualness with which we often speak, especially to the people closest to us, deserves real reconsideration. But this does not mean becoming stilted or overly careful in conversation. No, it means recognizing that the words we choose, particularly in moments where someone is vulnerable, struggling, or looking to us for response, carries more weight than we typically give them credit for. The second thing is to distinguish genuine graciousness from flattery in our own speech. I kind of mentioned that earlier in this video, but I think it's so important. And I think it's also something that I need to work on as well, because I've been known to just straight up, not like glaze people as the youngins say, but actually mean what you say, right? Because this verse specifically commends gracious words instead of merely pleasant sounding ones. And for that reason, I think it is worth examining our own patterns of speech for this distinction. Like, Are we offering genuine encouragement rooted in actual care for the other person's good? Or are we just saying nice things because it is socially easier, because we want to be liked, or because we are avoiding a harder but more honest conversation? I don't know, that's up to you, but in Ephesians 4:15, Paul gives us the standard to aim for, speaking the truth in love. Right? Genuine graciousness is not the absence of honesty. It is honesty delivered with real care for the person receiving it. And so practically, this means examining whether our kind words are actually kind, or whether they are a more comfortable substitute for the truth that someone actually needs. And then the third thing is to become intentional about delivering the specific kind of words this verse describes. Because beyond just being careful with our speech in general, this verse invites us to be proactive about offering genuinely gracious words to people who need them. And this might look like specifically thinking through who in our life is walking through something difficult right now, and intentionally reaching out with words of encouragement rather than waiting for the moment to arise naturally. I mean, it might look like noticing when someone has done something well and saying so directly rather than assuming they already know, right? And so becoming a person known for that kind of speech, that kind of soothing speech, requires actual effort and attentiveness, not just good intentions. And so let me just give some closing thoughts here, because Proverbs 16:24 makes a claim that it is easy to underestimate precisely because it sounds so simple. Kind words are nice. Like, most of us would agree with that without any resistance. But Solomon is saying something stronger than that. Gracious words are honeycomb. They reach the soul. They produce health in the body. They are not a pleasant addition to an otherwise functional life. They work like medicine. And we rarely think of our speech as something with the power to heal or to harm at this level, but Scripture consistently insists that it does. That every conversation we have today or tomorrow or yesterday, even though we can't change yesterday, is an opportunity to offer something closer to honeycomb or something closer to a freaking sword. And so the words are to choose, and according to Solomon, the choice matters more than we actually realize.